Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm Gisela. I'm from the marketing team, and I'm very excited for this webinar and getting to know more about diving in Galapagos with Benno and Eduardo, here from Galapagos. I just wanted to let you know that you can just feel free to join. Everyone can just join, and if you have any question at the end of the session, feel free to ask. Now I hand it over to Benno and Eduardo. Good luck. And yeah, very excited to know more.
Thanks, Gisela, and welcome everyone. We're a relatively small round today, so if you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and spit them out. Alternatively, you can also write your questions into the chat on the side. However, we will have a question and answers round at the very end of this presentation, where hopefully we can then answer all the questions that you might have. Let me just quickly introduce ourselves. So Gisela, you already met. She works in marketing in Galapatours. My name is Benno. I'm the founder of Galapatours. And with us today is, I'm happy to be able to call him a good friend, Eduardo. I lived on the islands myself for a while, and Edu became a good friend. Edu, and you can read all about his history on our webpage if you go to the team section, but Edu and his family actually have, well, probably one of the most important histories on the Galapagos. Edu's, was it your great-grandfather was the first Galapageno ever born on the islands? So yeah, and his grandfather then basically started tourism on the Galapagos Islands. So Edu has, I think, a relatively personal history also with the islands. And yeah, Edu, you're joining us from Santa Cruz, is that right?
Yes. Hello, everybody. That is correct, Benno, what you said about my grandfather. Although there is a distinction. Is the first registered born on Floreana Island rather than all of the Galapagos. But yeah, I'm in Santa Cruz currently. I have some time off of work, so it's perfect timing for this meeting.
Awesome. Then,
all right, so
please,
I take it on from here, I guess, eh?
Yeah, just to say also, the internet connection, as we all know, unfortunately, is quite bad on the Galapagos. So in case there are any connection problems or so, just write a message into the chat, and then I'll take over and we'll figure out the internet connection with Edu. So yeah, please go on and take over. I'm very excited to speak, to have Edu speak about it. I just come back, by the way, from a Galapagos cruise. I was there in November 2021, and it was my first time diving on a liveaboard in Galapagos. I just had this very experience, and I'm also excited about reliving it. So take it from here, Edu. Very excited.
All right, thank you. Benno, so diving in the Galapagos. So first, important to understand that whenever we talk about the Galapagos, we are talking about two areas that are included in this what we know as the Galapagos National Park. It's first the terrestrial area, and then it's, of course, the marine reserve, right? Terrestrial area, or the national park, as we refer to it. It was created in 1959, whereas the marine reserve was the official law, was approved in 1998, although there's been some laws and restrictions regarding fishing and marine resources in general. And I'm happy to say that it was further expanded in 2021. This marine reserve in the Galapagos is one of the largest in the world, right? It's ranked number 26 in this regard, and this is the destiny of tourism for thousands and thousands of visitors a year. Our highest number was 300,000 people prior to this whole situation, right? And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which makes it, which sort of classifies it as a very special place, right? These remote islands are all volcanic in origin, right? Some of these islands are very young, some of them are very old, right? But all of them are volcanoes that spawned in originally some 20 million years ago in between two tectonic plates, the Cocos and the Nazca tectonic plate. And nowadays they are farther south, and they are of a hotspot origin, what's known as a hotspot, which will be an intrusion of the mantle, a mantelic plume, onto the lithosphere, which will send material closer to the surface. This Galapagos hotspot created this beautiful archipelago in the middle of the Pacific, right? We're right in the equator, some about 18 main islands, or larger islands, with hundreds of small islets and rocks all over the archipelago. Now, the relative movement of the Nazca Plate, which is where the Galapagos archipelago is located, will give this setup of the islands. As you see, the oldest islands will be located on the southern eastern part of the archipelago, whereas the youngest will be located on the western part of the archipelago. This will make it so that you have a great variety also within the Galapagos archipelago. Some things that you find in the south, you won't find in the north, right? So it makes it diving very, very interesting in the Galapagos. But what precisely makes the Galapagos so
in here,
so
Eduardo.
unique, right? Or so special about? Apart, obviously, from the obvious fauna that we will be able to find unique here in the Galapagos, we have to say, if we want to go a little bit more in detail, right, that it's its location, right? Being right in the equator, it's in the area of convergence of the north and the southeast trade winds, right? They meet in the equator and they create this area that's known as the intertropical convergence zone. This will be very important because these areas in the world are of high productivity, and there's a lot of energy exchange in these areas. Now, this will be its location. Will be creating what's known as equatorial upwellings, right? Whenever we talk about whale sharks, this is one of the main reasons why we find big whale sharks here in the Galapagos. And also, due to the influence, obviously, of the three main marine currents that we have present in the islands, we have these coastal upwellings. Now, an upwelling is simply referring to food coming from the deepest parts of the oceans to the surface, right? And this attracts a lot of life and sustains this marine life in general. Now, for the Galapagos, its marine currents are, of course, of crucial importance. This will be determining the weather in the islands, right? But we have three main currents. The Humboldt current, which is coming from the south, as you can see in this diagram. We have Cromwell current, which is coming from the western part of the Pacific, right? It's also known as the counter-south equatorial current. And we have the influence of El Nino current, right? Or Panama flow, which is warm water that's coming from the north. Now, these different marine currents have brought to the Galapagos different types of life, right? Some things like cold water, some things like warm water. So this is why we have this categorization of different marine bioregions in the archipelago, right? Which is 5. We have the central, the southeastern part, the northern part, the far northern, which is probably one of the most famous marine bioregions in the Galapagos. We're talking about Wolf and Darwin Islands. And the western part, which will be very special, along with this small zone that you can see, Elizabeth, right in between Fernandina and Isabela, which is the largest of the islands in the archipelago. This western part will hold the greatest amount of endemic marine species, right, unique to this area in the world, the Galapagos archipelago. Now, it's very important to understand these two factors, right, or these two elements, its location and the marine currents, because this will make the best out of your experience, right? Understanding the climate and the seasons, the two main weather seasons that we have in the Galapagos, is key for a satisfactory experience during your visit here in the Galapagos, right? So we talk about two main weather seasons from late December until May. It is referred to as El Nino season. Now, El Nino season, it's known for more favorable or benign weather conditions. This means less wind. The ocean is much calmer. There's not such strong currents. This would be the ideal time for, say, beginner divers who are interested in exploring the northern part of the archipelago, the farther northern part of the archipelago, but don't have as much experience as other people could have, right? Visibility tends to be better during this time of the year in the water. And the temperature is nicer, right? It's generally easier diving conditions, warmer water, less current, less wind, calmer surface of the ocean. But there's a sort of a downside to these nice conditions, which will be number one, rain. This is the rainy season in the Galapagos, and it's hot, right? It's very warm, as you can see in this chart on the left side. We have air temperature, and we're talking about over 30 Celsius at a time, right? So the humidity plus the heat, it can be something to take in account, especially if you're doing land-based tours, right? If you're staying in town. On the Liveaboard, on the boat, there's always AC, so that's not really a problem. Yeah. Now, the other season, it's known as Humboldt season. It goes from July to December, right? And this is the colder time of the year. This is known as the dry and cold time of the year because we have the greater influence of Humboldt during these months. Right now, this means colder water, usually less visibility. Now, you're probably thinking, what does good and bad visibility? Because it's very relevant, but bad visibility or worse visibility during Humboldt season, we're talking about 10, 15, 20 meters visibility. Whereas the good time of the year or the clearer time of the year, it's maybe 20, 25 plus meters visibility now. That being said, as you know, the ocean can change, from a moment in just a moment. But back to Humboldt. So colder water, stronger current, stronger waves, stronger wind. So this is the time for more experienced divers. Now, these harsh conditions come with a treat, right? Which is the megafauna, which is what we see focusing on, obviously, in the Galapagos during Humboldt season, would be the prime time of the year for encountering this, for example, this enormous whale shark, right? Their population.
That's actually a picture
whale
I
shark
took
that can be found here in the Galapagos is quite special compared to other places in the world where you can find these largest fish in the ocean. And the thing is that the ones that we find here appear to be as big as they get, some 16 meters, right? Most of them will be females, and most of them are pregnant in the pregnancy stage, right? So obviously, gigantic whale sharks. But also Galapagos is known for a place for close encounter with sharks without having to interfere with their behavior, right? This means no baiting, no cages, anything like that. This is diving with the sharks in their environment. This we can see Galapagos shark over here. This it's Wolf Island dive site that's referred to as the landslide. It's one of the best places for a close encounter with Galapagos sharks just cruising on top of the reef. Obviously, of course, the big schools or the big schooling of hammerheads, right, I should say, in the far northern regions, this is the best area for them, but it's not restricted to Wolf and Darwin. You can also find whale sharks diving off of the central islands. This would be referring to day tour activities, right? It's a common encounter to find dolphins over here, different species, rhesus dolphins, spinners dolphins, bottlenose dolphins, lots of marine mammals in the Galapagos, dolphins, orcas from time to time. There is apparently a resident population of orcas over here in the Galapagos, some 36 individuals apart, about 36 individuals. During Humboldt season, which will be the most productive time of the year, is a time for humpbacks, right? They will be making these migrations to the tropical waters, and it's a possibility to find these animals underwater, right? That would be a big treat. We get to see them at the surface, several species of whales found in the Galapagos. And since we're talking about marine mammals, we cannot leave behind the most graceful of them all underwater, which is the Galapagos sea lion, right? So amazing encounters, Galapagos sea lions present all across the archipelago. This is something that you will almost very likely find if you come diving over here. Turtles, all the turtles in the world you can think of, you're going to see turtles every single dive, all over the place. And of course, some of the Galapagos superstars, right? The endemic species, the very famous Galapagos marine iguana. We get to see as well on the western part of the archipelago iguanas and the Galapagos Southern Ocean sunfish, or the mola, right? Very special creature, unique, endemic to the archipelago. Some interesting fish, endemic as well as the sea robin, right? The Galapagos sea robin. It's a common thing to find as well, with a little bit of luck and patience, Pacific seahorses. Another endemic, as they refer to this fish over here, the Angelina Jolie fish, right? The red-lipped batfish, very special. And now Galapagos, not only big things, megafauna, but also we can find smaller things, several species of nudibranches, right? We can see an octopus. Maybe you can see on the left part of the screen, there's an octopus there. This was taken at Isabela Island, right? And all sorts of creatures. Galapagos, it's a most very special place to dive. And one of my favorite places in all of my dive sites that I've done, it's over here. Now, in order to dive in the Galapagos, there's two alternatives, two options. The first one is daily tours, right? Daily tours means land-based. You will be staying in town. Either it could be at San Cristobal Island or Santa Cruz Island, And there are several options, dive shops, that you can find as add-ons on the website. And this is typically how daily tour works, right? You are going to do either a car ride or a boat ride to the dive site. This will change or will vary depending on the dive site, but it takes about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours transit to the place, right? Now, obviously, all of these dive shops offer full equipment rental, which includes everything that you need, right? There will be nitrox availability on these sites. You just need to request it. The price will change. They will vary $200, $250 US dollars, that is, per day. And this is 2 dives. As I said, the prices will vary a little bit depending on where you go. Typically, you'll be starting 7:30. You're gonna meet at the dive site, and then you go on a car or you go on a pier and then on a boat. Most of the fitting for the equipment will be done the night prior, the day before, right? And what are the advantages of doing daily tours? And this is that you have access to different difficulty dive sites, right? So this means beginner friendly. If you're not too experienced, as you will see, which is necessary for liveaboards, if you don't have that much experience, you can do daily tours, right? And there are easy dive sites or easier dive sites that you can access. And if you're new to diving, or you have your special someone with you and you want to take them diving, you can spoil them for the rest of their life by taking them and do an introductory course in the Galapagos. And then diving after this will never be the same. So this is known as Discover Scuba Diving, or any introductory course will be available as well. Now, important to understand that there is an itinerary restriction, right? The Galapagos, or the direction of the Galapagos National Park, determines where these boats go, right? So there's a fixed itinerary. To give you an example, on Monday you go to Mosquera in North Seymour, and then on Tuesday you go to Bartolome, which will be a different island, different dive sites. Okay, so this is about daily tours. Now, the other alternative, which I personally think is the best alternative, if possible, is liveaboards, right? So the big idea with the liveaboard is that it includes everything, obviously, right? But you get access to areas of the archipelago which you otherwise you can't. Meaning, you can't access these places doing day tours, right? Particularly, we'll be referring to the western part of the archipelago and to the Wolf and Darwin Islands, the far northern region, right? How does the liveaboard day goes by? Well, usually it's going to start about 6 in the morning. We want to be getting ready to jump in the water. So this is early mornings, right? This is intense diving. Sometimes, or most of the times, we'll be doing 4 dives a day, starting 6 a.m. and the last dive is at about 4 p.m. Or something like this, right? It's necessary for doing these liveaboards that you have experience with diving in current, right? And that you are comfortable with surge, waves, wind, and with cold water, right? As you saw in the chart before, the temperature in the water can range a lot depending on the time of the year. It can go as low as 15, 14 Celsius on the western part of the archipelago, so you need to be ready for this, right? It's recommended somewhere above 50 dives, but if you want to be on the safe end, most of the boats will be asking for 100 dives plus to come to the Galapagos. As I mentioned before, the first half of the year, the conditions are a little bit better, right? So if you're not too sure, if you have enough experience, I would recommend take that time of the year, right? In humble season, 100, 150 dives is always a good thing to have under your belt, so you can deal with the conditions and enjoy yourself, and for the rest of the group to enjoy themselves as well. For these liveaboards, nitro certification and use is highly recommended because we're doing lots of dives during the day. Okay, so I seem to have lost my. There we go. Yeah. Yep. So full equipment rental available as well. Nitrox, as I mentioned, in 15-liter cylinders, 100 cubic feet or foot cylinders if your air consumption is not as good. And again, important to know itinerary restrictions. We will be going over an example, right, of what our itinerary on a liveaboard looks like. And most of the navigation is done overnight, right? Some maybe considerations regarding the navigation, right? If you're someone that tends to get motion sick, again, the first half of the year would be the best time of the year the ocean is calmer. Now, Benno, maybe you want to take over here and explain us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to explain a little more about the ships, but before that, we already had the first question in the chat, Edu, from Kirsten Bölker, who asks if humpbacks are ready in the Galapagos in early July.
This is the time when Humboldt begins, and this will be the time when they start arriving, right? For more certainty in seeing the humpbacks, I would say August, September, October, right, would be the best time.
Yeah, when I was just in Galapagos in November, so all the pictures that Edu just showed you guys are real and are from the Galapagos. I saw all the animals, mola mola, we had whale, shark, hundreds of hammerheads. The only thing we did not see, and I was there in November, were the humpbacks. But Edu, you've probably seen humpbacks already a bunch of times, right?
Yes, I've seen humpbacks. I haven't been lucky enough to find them underwater. I've been very close. You could hear them, and it's just a very amazing experience. But we see them at the surface during the Humboldt season. Is a common sighting.
Yeah, I remember on a naturalist cruise once we even snorkeled with the orcas, and then we saw the orcas coming next to the ship, and then we jumped in. It was the most insane experience. And also this time we saw orcas again. So yeah, that was a really insane experience. I can second one thing. On my cruise, we all dove with nitrox, and I would really much recommend this. So you don't really go far, and most times actually this kind of current diving, you just hang on and the animals come to you, especially the big sharks, for example. They would sleeping with one brain, our guide explained, and the other half of their brain awake. They would just float through the currents, and you hang on best even, so always with gloves, and better even with a reef hook. You would hook yourselves into the stones and then just watch this cinema pass by without even diving. But that's why the experience with diving, I think, is much recommended. But going back to the ship, so we were saying there are day trips and then there are the liveaboards. This here is just to give an idea of what this then would look like. This is, for example, one ship that is called Aqua. This is the one that I was just on. And that's like a budget cruise ship. We differentiate between budget, mid-range, first class, and then luxury. And so this is, for example, what a budget ship would look like. And diving cruises here already start as cheaply as $2,750. Admittedly, though, this is a really special offer. Typically, you can expect a diving cruise to cost for 8 days something around 5,000, 6,000 euros, depending then again on the quality of the ship, mostly, because the experience is always the same, independently of the ship. This here is a ship called Sky, and just a few pictures to give you an impression of what this would look like. All the ships are for 16 passengers, and bottom left of the screen you can see the dive deck, which is never huge, but for 16 passengers more than enough. And you have some space there under the seat where you can store your fins, and you might have been on other liveaboard ships already. It always works the same. So you store your personal stuff under the seat. And then there are your bottles on the back. Typically, there is also a water tank where you put your camera in, and then you get ready. And top left, you see a bar. So all the ships always have a really nice sun deck. Bottom left, you see the restaurant, let's call it. The eating area is probably a better term. Typically, ships serve all kinds of food, international food, but also there is also some Ecuadorian cuisine mixed in. And it's typically buffet style. Some of the luxury ships even have a la carte. And then what is really important to note is the top right picture. This is one of the dinghies. And like with all liveaboard ships, we don't jump into the water directly from the boat, but you would get on board of a dinghy. And then 2 groups are typically built. If a ship of 16 passengers is sold out, then 2 groups of 8 people are built, or 2 groups of 5 people, depending on how many other passengers there are on the ship. And then there's one dive guide and another dive guide. So always maximum 8 people per diving group. And this is also what the national park gives as a regulation for safety reasons. There may never be more than 8 people per dive guide. And then, of course, buddy teams are formed in diving, and you always stick to your buddy. But Edo will talk further about this. Then this is what a cabin typically looks like. None of our Galapagos cruises, the dive liveaboards, are really super luxurious. So if you're looking for a huge jacuzzi and, you know, massage service and all of that. This is not what we can offer, and none of the ships will offer something like this in Galapagos. But the contact with nature is insane, and all of the ships are clean and have really nice cabins, always, again, depending on the price range. But what you get in Galapagos, more than luxury, is really just an incredible contact with nature. The bottom left, you see again the dinghy, and in the background, the Darwin's Arch, which has collapsed now 2 years ago or 3 years ago, right, Edu? So the picture is not one of the newest pictures. But what is really nice about these dinghies is that if, for example, you are completely frozen, you come back on board, you get a warm drink and a towel, but then afterwards you can get back on the dinghy, and like you see in the bottom right part of the screen, then you can use the dinghy for dinghy rides, and you can go, like in this example, into the mangrove forests of Isabella and explore a bit the pelicans that are there, or the rays that are underwater, or the turtles that would stick their necks out. So that's also a really nice thing to do also after a dive cruise. Right, so this is typically then what a route would look like of one of these ships. And maybe, Edu, you can talk us a bit through what these 8 days would look like.
Of course. Okay, so there's different alternatives, right? You can, depending on which boat you're going, you will either start in Baltra, located just north of Santa Cruz Island in the central part of the archipelago, or Isabela on the southern eastern part. There's 2 airports on the Galapagos where you can arrive, Baltra and San Cristobal. So typically the first day when you arrive will be the day to set up all of your equipment, right? If you're renting equipment, this will be the time to make sure that everything fits, and we do a check dive. Usually the day on arrival, you do it always, I should say. On the day of arrival, you do a check dive, make sure that everything is working correctly, and then you start usually a navigation. In this case, for example, they do the check dive, and then they move off to Mosquera Island and then Bartolomé, right? This would be a day where you want to do some dives in the central part of the archipelago, which is usually easier diving than in the farther northern area, so that you can, get used to being in the water again, make sure that everything is working correctly. It's like going on a bicycle. You always need a little bit of training again. And usually after a day in the central part of the archipelago, where you will do around 3 dives, this varies a little bit from itineraries, you will be making your way up to Wolf and Darwin Islands. Normally, most of the ships will offer 3 days over here at this part. This example, we see Wolf Island, 4 dives. Now, this navigation, right, in this case, from Bartolomé to Wolf Island, it's a long navigation, right? It takes about 13 hours or so navigation. You navigate throughout the night. And then Wolf Island, 6 in the morning, you're in the water already, scuba diving. Usually, you wake up in the morning, you do the first dive, and then you do a briefing, and you have a light breakfast, then you come back. After dive, proper breakfast, you do a second dive before lunch, and after lunch, 2 more dives in the afternoon. Itinerary, Wolf and Darwin will be the more special part, if you will, of this trip, because this is where you find this megafauna. Wolf, then you move on to Darwin Island, full day at Darwin Island, the Darwin's Arch, right, as you see, I'll show you in a moment. But diving at Darwin is not the island itself, it's rather at the very famous arch that, as Benno was telling us, collapsed 2 years ago. It's now, they have different names for it. So the Pillars of Evolution, right, the Darwin Pillars, different name. And then usually you have a mixed day between Darwin and Wolf. You do 2 dives in Darwin, and then you move on to Wolf Island, and then you do 2 more dives. Then you start making your navigation to the western part of the archipelago, Fernandina and Isabela, where you will do 4 dives. Now, this is a very special place in the archipelago, one of my favorite parts of these islands, because this is, as I told you when we first started, this is the area where you find the most endemic species of the Galapagos. This is the place for the marine iguanas. This is the place for the molas. This is the best area for orcas, for seahorses, for macro life, small things, the red-lipped batfish, all of these creatures that you find almost exclusively in the archipelago on the western part. Then you go around back to the central part of the archipelago, crossing the equator for a 5th time, 4th or 5th time. And then usually you do a dive or 2 dives in the morning, and then you do a land visit in the afternoon. Again, this varies from itinerary to itinerary slightly. Okay. Now, as I was telling you, a little bit more detail on Wolf and Darwin Islands, which would be the highlights or one of the highlights of this trip, right? You can see an example of what I like to do. 5:30 is a wake-up call, a light breakfast, some fruit, some toast, some coffee, some tea, while you get the briefing for the dive site that you're going to do. As you see in Wolf, there's about 5 or 6 dive sites that you can do. Which dive site we pick, it depends a little bit on the current. Usually the southern areas, the Elephant, the Landslide, and Shark Bay will have the most activity during Humboldt season, but strong currents, right? Really strong current, which is something that Benno was telling us. The way that we dive in the Galapagos, it's sort of like a semi-stationary dive. You jump in the water and you do, especially in the northern islands, you do a negative descent, meaning that you go with your BCD completely empty and right away you swim to the bottom, right? Ideally, we get all together at some 5 or 6 meters and check everybody's okay. And then you start underwater climbing, right? Because that's how it can feel sometimes because of the strong current. Then we move to the areas where we know there's more activity. This is usually related to cleaning stations. This is where the sharks approach the reef, right? Cleaning stations. And then you just hold on to the rocks and you wait, right? And as Benno was telling us, you just watch this movie unfold in front of your eyes. Yeah, and then you let go of the reef and you go with the current and you come up at the surface, ideally everybody together, right? And then you repeat this 4 times a day, right? As Benno was mentioning, my personal experience tells me that luxury is not something that you're looking for when you're diving 4 times a day, right? You're spending most of your time underwater, so what you want is a comfortable, clean place where you can rest and you can eat good. It's a mix of stationary and drift dives, correct? Yes, you jump in, you look for activity. If there's not much activity, you drift for a little bit, you stop again, rinse and repeat.
Edu, can you
So
hear
this
me?
is a little bit of Wolf. Just so you know, if you're interested, the best diving spots would be the Landslide and Shark Bay. Right, this is the area where we find the greatest amount of sharks, right, particularly hammerheads. And then obviously, right, Darwin Island, very, very, very famous dive site in the world. This is the best place for the whale sharks, right? Reef hooks, can you rent them and try them on the check dive? Usually boats don't have reef hooks for rental, so I recommend bring your own. Yeah. Now, underwater topography.
Edu, quick question, because we also had another question about dry suits. Simon Proud asked if it gets cold. So I get cold easy, he says. Do you recommend dry suits? I'm dry suit certified. Do any of the boats rent dry suit? I told Simon that I don't know of any ships that actually rent out dry suits. So he would have to bring those himself. Or maybe
Correct.
even he can rent some on the islands, right?
No, there is no rental of dry suits. None of the boats that I know of have rental dry suits. And there are no dry suits for rental in the islands, so you will have to bring your own.
So bring that with you yourself. Okay, sorry, back to you.
No problem. So yeah, Darwin Island, as you can see, this is the arch, right? We'll be diving the southern eastern part of the arch. We're not diving the whole dive site. Most of the dive sites will be focused on this area called the theater, right? You can see it in this diagram, and it's just the coolest place. The platform is a nice platform, as you see, at 17 meters. There's a drop off, a small ledge that goes up to 22 and continues to go down. And it's just, you lay there, you lay on top of the rocks and you just wait. Sharks usually come very, very close. Another interesting site would be the driveway I like a lot. These Wolf and Darwin Islands are the parts of the archipelago that have the greatest or the largest structural reef in the islands, right? So it's lots of coral here in this area, and compared to the central part of the archipelago, which is mostly rocky reefs, right? And yeah, so as you see, Darwin Island, very special place. We usually will be drifting, following the current, right? On some occasions, you might need to advance a little bit against it, but just for a small period of time. now you can see over here an approximate dive profile and the dive rules when we're doing here in the Galapagos. Very important, there's no solo diving, right? This is a national park, right? Remember, marine reserve. So you have to be always accompanied by a guide, right? As Benno mentioned, the maximum ratio allowed by the park is 8 passengers per guide. The boat has a 16 people capacity. That means 2 guides. Now, if necessary, right, if you feel the need, you can always request for a private guide. Yeah, this is something that can be done as well. If you're not too confident and you really want to explore this area of the Galapagos, you can request prior in time for a private guide, right? This will make your experience probably better, right? Typical depth of these dives would be average between 15 and 20 meters, right? The maximum of 30, the maximum allowed by the park is the recreational limit, which would be 40 meters as well. But there's usually no need to go that deep. Most of the activity will be staying between 15 and 20 meters. Therefore, at least an advanced certification, right, is necessary for diving here in the Galapagos. The dive times are usually 60 minutes, although these will vary, obviously, as all divers know, depending on the air consumption of the group, right? Because there's no solo diving, so you have to stay together with the guide. If necessary, if some people are low on air and everybody still has plenty of gas, we can send you with your body up to the surface, right? The temperature, as mentioned already a couple of times, it will vary greatly. The western part of the archipelago is the cold place, right? So this is 1 day of really cold waters during humboldt season and just okay waters during El Nino season. But that's very relevant, right? Depending on where you're coming from and what conditions are you used to on diving. I get cold throughout the year. Now, yeah, minimum gas at the surface, standard procedures, right? You want to be at the surface with 50 psi at a minimum of 30 bar. No decompression dives. It's very important to carry along a surface marker buoy and a dive alert. Most of the ships will be providing these safety devices. And also, plenty of the ships also have a GPS tracker, right? That will give you can be found. This is very important. Yeah, safety. And as I mentioned, right, the conditions, you have to be used surge, waves, and current. And the conditions may change between and during the dives, right? Strong currents, you can have 2, 3, up to 5 knot currents, which is a very, very strong current. I know not throughout the year and not most of the dive set, but conditions can be challenging, right? This is something that needs to be noted.
Just a comment, Edu, because you just mentioned bottles and air consumption, and I let me put the slide here back. So the picture that you see on the right-hand side is actually a picture I took just a few months ago, and this is a Swiss photographer called Olli, and he had always this big DSLR camera with him. And I found it really interesting because in the end, he was always low on air, and he was a very experienced diver. So maybe a tip from not my personal experience, but from his experience, if you bring a big camera with you, especially with the surges and the current, this requires you to constantly work this camera and will exert more air out of your body. So if you bring a big camera, maybe ask on board of the ship for a bigger cylinder, and then you don't have to worry about that.
Yes, for sure. It's I think it's a good advice. Always you see photographers, they always carry 15-liter cylinders, larger bottles, because as you say, it takes much more energy, therefore you use a lot of air. Now, in terms of photography in the Galapagos, right, this could be a question, this is a commonly asked question, is what am I looking for? Well, both, right? You're going to need a wide angle for the big stuff, and you're going to need a macro for the smaller stuff on the western part of the archipelago, so you have to think about this, right? Now, also bear in mind, if you bring in cameras, the currents, right? If you bring in cameras with strobes and video lights, all these things, the current is something that you have to take in account with this regard, right? So a 15-liter cylinder, 100 cubic feet, it's an excellent recommendation from Benno. So yeah, this is basically what I have for you guys to tell you about the Galapagos. If there are any other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them, address them as I can.
We just got a question from Tan. Hi, Tan. I don't have too much experience, she says, but I would love to join an actual cruise. Are the cruises generally beginner-friendly, Edu?
Right. So thank you, Dan, for your question. Okay, let's say diving in the Galapagos in the Liveaboard, you want experience, right? This is very important to keep in mind. But there are ways around it. Okay, so if you dive during the first half of the year, say February, March, you get to see still hammerheads, lots of hammerheads, the endemic species, the iguanas, the batfish, the mollas. You get to see all of these things, right? Whale sharks, probably not, most likely not. This is not the best time of the year, but the ocean is much calmer at this time, and the current is not nearly as strong as during humboldt season, right? And then there's always the alternative of a private guide, right? This also will work wonders if you don't have a lot of experience, if you're not too sure, but you really want to explore this. Hire a private guide, right? You will be going along with a group, and you're gonna have someone that's dedicated to you and making sure that you feel safe and you enjoy yourself.
Yes, perfect. Let's see. So what I wanted to mention now, there are, Edu, how many ships? I think 6 or 7 diving ships in the Galapagos. And if you're looking to, so again, also my recommendation would be rather go on a liveaboard. If you're not so experienced, then don't go maybe during the Humboldt season, but pick the calmer season. If you want to compare the different dive ships, I would recommend that you go to galapatours.com/diving, and there you can then filter by date. So we pride ourselves in having, I believe, the only page that lists all the ships with all the dates and all the discounts. And then you can filter by price, you can filter by duration of the cruise, you can filter by date, by cabin available, by price range, etc., etc. And this way you can relatively easy find out which are the different options. And then, of course, we have a team of Galapagos specialists that can walk you through the process and help you pick exactly the right route and the right ship for you. Edu, I see we have another question here from Pam, who says, I'm not a swimmer, but she has booked cruises in Mar. Will I be able to enjoy? So Pam is not a swimmer.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing, I'm assuming Mar means March? Referring to March?
In March, yeah, March that must be.
If you know how to dive, if you have your certification, then you will be able to join. Right now, if you're referring to maybe a land tour or land cruise, you can obviously join as well. Just probably don't do the snorkeling activities, but you can always go along in the dinghy and the pangas and do these navigating along the coast and watching at the scenery and the animals.
Yeah, maybe it could be that Pam has booked a naturalist cruise with us. So let me quickly explain. Generally, in Galapagos, there are 2 different types of. She has booked an expedition ship. She says she doesn't swim or dive. So Pam, it's yes, you can participate also in water activities. It works like this. In Galapagos, there are naturalist cruise ships and there are diving cruise ships. And for security reason, the national park does not allow any mix of those activities. So a diving ship can only do diving, and a naturalist ship can only do naturalist activities, meaning walking on land, and snorkeling is also included. So Pam, if you have booked an expedition ship, there are going to be snorkeling activities, and you can also participate in those snorkeling activities as a non-swimmer. You can request, for example, for one of the crew members to always be with you. You can wear a life vest, so there is no way of you going under, and you can always have somebody with you. And then you will be wearing goggles, and you can still observe all the marine life. Also, inquire with our Galapagos specialists, because some of the ships, especially the upper end luxury and first class ships, they offer something called transparent kayaks. And then you can sit in a kayak and you have this transparent bottom of the kayak and you can look into the water without even touching the water, which is an incredible experience. So, Edu, anything to add?
No, I don't think I have much more to add. Just maybe just to address to Pam that it's not necessary for you to swim. You can get to enjoy everything in the Galapagos, but bear in mind, right, that half of the activities it's water activities. You go on the boat and you can experience everything. It's really nice. And if you, as Benno was saying, if you feel the inclination or the desire to try it, to go in the water, I'm pretty sure you'll be feeling safe. The crew members and the guides, we're always taking real good care of making sure, especially to introduce people to the water, people that are not swimmers. It's always a treat. It's always the biggest joy.
Edu, we have a question from Simon that I would like to read out to you, and you can probably answer this better than anybody here. Simon, who seems to be an experienced diver, says, do you have any suggestions for gloves? And Simon also has a reef hook. Are those preferable? Also, I believe rebreathers are not accepted, Simon says. Why is that?
All right. Thank you, Simon. This is good questions. Gloves. Throwaway gloves. This is the kind of gloves that you're going to need for the Galapagos, because usually they end up teared into pieces. Yeah, maybe like some couple of gloves that you can throw away, just like gardening gloves or something like that. And for the cold part, maybe some neoprene gloves, 3-5 millimeter gloves will be more than enough for the western part where it's a little bit cold. Now, regarding the rebreathers, it's a little bit... there is availability of rebreathers in the Galapagos, but this needs to be done through a third party, right? As a matter of fact, me and my brother, coincidentally, we can provide logistic support for rebreather. But this needs to be done under special conditions, right? What the laws of the Galapagos National Park state is that if you want to do rebreather on a cruise, you can do so, but you have to bring along a guide that's certified in rebreather. Right now, there's not many of us in the Galapagos. There's 3 or 4 in total. So that can be done, but it's a special procedures, sort of. If you want some more information, we can talk later. I can send you a link or something if you're interested in booking. There is possibilities of rebreather trips in the Galapagos.
And as to the reef hooks, so from my experience, I saw I didn't have any reef hook with me. Some others did, and I envied them because it's so easy. You just hook it in, and then you can fold your arms and just sit still there like in a cinema chair. I much envied them. And I was always struggling, gripping, and also I don't feel too good touching stuff underwater. So I think it's better, right, Edu, just to bring a good reef hook instead.
Yes, for sure. Reef hook helps a lot. I would say, like, there's pros and cons, right? I personally find that reef hooks are useful and necessary when you need your hands to do something else. Like, say, for example, take a picture and manage a big camera, right? But the counter side of a reef hook is that you'll be floating on top of the reef. And usually what the behavior of the sharks over here is that they're swimming very close against the current, very close to the reef. So as soon as they see us, since they're, as Benno told us, they're like sort of half asleep, as soon as they see you, they startle and then they swim away. So the farther out you are of the reef, the more exposed you are, right? But this is useful for certain, for sure. I mean, I would say if you have it, bring it, and then you see if you want to use it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I can tell you one anecdote. On board of our cruise, we had 2 people who were fairly unexperienced. I was one of them. I had 50 and something immersions maybe when I went on the cruise, and there was another lady who also had 50. We were both not struggling greatly, but I did have to concentrate always. So 50 dives I would recommend as a minimum. We did, however, have some people who, one of them was a dive instructor, and he had, I think, 1,900 or 2,000 dives already, and there were professional underwater photographers. And like Edu mentioned before, once you have dove in Galapagos, it really spoils you for life. And my girlfriend, she did her first dives in Galapagos, and we went diving after that elsewhere, and it's really hard for me to get excited about a dive if I don't see hundreds of hammerheads and, you know, big sharks and turtles, and then you have the sea lions. It's really, really incredible in Galapagos. So even the people with over 1,000 dives on our cruise said that by far those were the most amazing dives they have seen so far. It's quite something. I hope I'm not overselling here.
I would say it's a very accurate description. This is something I hear every time. It's like after diving in the Galapagos, things are never, ever the same.
Should we? So, are there any other questions that you guys might have? Pam asks, can I get this info in written or a brochure, or is there an online link? So yes, actually, just now, thank you, Gisela. Gisela put up a link. You should see a link on your screen that says compare our diving cruises. So you can click there and you can then look at all the diving cruises. Also, in the top of the menu, you will find the naturalist cruises sorted by budget, first class, luxury, etc., etc. If you have any questions, you can always write us at service@Galapatours, regardless. If there are no other questions, then I have prepared a bunch of questions that maybe would still be interesting that we could go through. Let's just do 2 or 3 since we've already been talking for 50 minutes. Edu, so we at Galapatours, we often get questions about the certifications, more specifically, which certifications are accepted and which companies. So there is PADI, right? Then there is CSAT, CMAS. Are there any restrictions, and what should you have? What qualification?
No restrictions whatsoever. All certifications are recognized, are allowed, permitted. Yeah, it's no problem. Just I would say in regards of certification, you want to be at least advanced, the equivalent of an advanced open water diver. And Nitrox certified is always a plus, as I told you before, especially on the Liveaboard, you're doing lots of dives, right? So you're building up that nitrogen pretty high up. So you want to make sure that, Nitrox is just safer, is better, much, much better in general.
Good. Amazing. What else? Maybe one comment also for you, Pam, if you want to give diving a try once. It's always, so I would always recommend, this is a good recommendation. I would always recommend, if you go on a Liveaboard cruise or a naturalist cruise for that matter in Galapagos, then take a couple of days off afterwards. It is such a mind-blowing experience, whether it's diving or just a normal cruise in Galapagos, but you will be spending between 4 and 8 days, some cruises are even longer, on the islands, and you will be swimming with hammerheads and sharks and dolphins, and if you're lucky, whales and mola mola. So to process all this takes a couple of days. I strongly think it would be a mistake if you fly to Galapagos and then on the last day of your cruise, you go directly to the airport and you fly back to New York and go straight back into normal life. So I would much recommend take a hotel for 3-4 days, spend a couple of days in Puerto Ayora, on Santa Cruz Island, where Edu is joining us from, or go to San Cristobal, which is a smaller island, and take 3-4 days just to wind down, go to the beach and have a beer, to process everything that you have seen. This is, I think, really a good idea. Edu, anything you want to add? Otherwise, I think we can wrap this up.
I would like to echo this last part that you said. Lots of diving, right? So if you're doing the Liveaboard, you're gonna be tired afterwards, right? I guarantee you're gonna be tired. You're gonna want to have a couple days to relax, and also you get to see a little bit of the land over here, right? Which is very special as well. I mean, if you're making this trip all the way over here to the Galapagos, might as well enjoy a few more days. This not only will be, I think, ideal for you, but this is the best for the Galapagos as well, right? If you think on a conservation angle. Carbon footprint, right? All the energy that it takes to make it here, you want to make it worth, right? And this is a common or something I hear very commonly from our guests is that they wish they had a little bit more time, or that they booked a little bit extra time, right? So thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Perfect. So, for example, for you, Pam, if you already booked a naturalist cruise, then you can reach out to us and we will gladly arrange for 3 or 4 more days. And you can even try one of those, how did you call it, Edu, like a trial dives, or a snorkeling session, or a kayak excursion, anything for that matter. With that being said, I got goosebumps sometimes during this presentation, because it really took me aback to what we were experiencing just a couple of months ago in the Pacific Ocean. And I thank you very much, Edu, for the wonderful presentation. Thank you, Gisela, for setting this up. And thanks, everyone, for joining. This was amazing. If you have any further questions, please write us at service@galapatours.com. And happy Easter, I guess. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Benno, just once I see that Pam wants a contact number if you want to share it with her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let me type that into the chat so everybody can have the number as well. That's a good point. Thank you. There we go. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for joining. This is the English number, and you can also just leave us a voicemail. We are based in Central America and in Germany. So if you call outside of our office hours, just leave us a voicemail. Thanks again, everyone, and happy Easter.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Happy Easter. Bye.